This is the You Can Learn Chinese podcast. For everyone who's trying to learn Chinese or reaching for the next level, you came to the right place. I am your host, Jared Turner, and exaggerations went up by like 1,000,000% last year. My co-host is John Pasden, and his hardest part of Hypochondriacs Anonymous is admitting he doesn't have a problem. Let's get to it. Hey guys, this is Jared Turner joining you from Utah in the United States.
Hey everybody, I'm John Pasden. I'm in Shanghai, China. How's everybody doing?
Well, today, Johnny, we have a pretty cool interview.
Yeah, this interview is kind of special in that it came from a viral video that Jared discovered.
I follow this girl on Instagram who goes by Happi, Happi.
Well, cool. I hope this is an uplifting interview for us here today.
She speaks Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, and I have found out she also speaks some Shanghainese. Sounds like she's giving you a run for your money, John.
Man, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean plus Shanghainese. That was like what I was trying to do at one point, but I had to give up on the Korean, and Shanghainese never took it that far. But this girl, she is living the dream.
Well, she recently had a video go viral with her singing at a concert with Joker Xue. So this guy's Xue Zhiqian. He's a Chinese pop star from Shanghai, and he's going through the crowd. And he comes to her and he shares the mic with her, and it just turns into this moment. It's just, wow. She has this amazing voice, and she totally nails it. It was just so cool. To make a long story short, I got her to sit for an interview. She's just so friendly, endearing, authentic, and she's just like someone who genuinely loves learning languages and people. So this was a really fun interview.
All right, well, let's get to it. Let's listen.
Hello, everyone. I am Happi across cultures. I am here from the Midwest, and I've been learning both Japanese, Chinese, and a little bit of Korean for like 10 plus years. Whoop, whoop.
All right, Happi. Why did you start learning Chinese?
Wonderful question. And many people that I've heard also on this podcast usually have really cool backstories. But for me, it turns out that I was a very weird kid back in high school. And growing up in the Midwest.
Who wasn't, right?
Well, everyone thought that they were weird, but I was very weird. So I was actually weird. But why, you may think? Because, well, growing up in the Midwest in the early 2010s, it wasn't cool yet to consume media in different languages. Yet here I was watching anime and listening to K-pop, and being passionate about learning like Korean and Japanese made me really weird at that time, but at least for my American peers. As fate would have it, the college campus right next to my school had tons of Chinese exchange students. And this was the time of like Attack on Titan and EXO just coming out. So they were actually very encouraging and very kind with my journey of learning languages. And so here you had a bunch of Chinese students really encouraging me to learn Japanese and Korean, and those that were learning themselves. And I realized, wow, you guys are much kinder and more supportive than my American classmates. So I started hanging out with them, and that's really how it all started.
Oh, that's really interesting. So I gotta ask, I want to back up a little bit. What was it, though, that appealed to you? You say you're listening to K-pop and you're reading manga and stuff. Any specific things that really kind of piqued your interest or attracted you towards that?
For like Chinese specifically, or for Japanese and Korean?
Yes.
Yes. So I would say that at this time, watching anime was a thing that emo kids would do, if you remember that phase.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Well, I would hang out with the emo kids and try to fit in, but they told me that I'm too cheerful to be emo, sadly.
They might be right.
Yeah, they're quite right. Thus, I am happy. So even though I wasn't able to like be emo, I hung out with them and also got to learn about anime like through them. So that was my first exposure into learning Japanese, and it sounded so much fun. And it was my first exposure to like a different language that I was really passionate about. And my high school ended up having Japanese class. So my teacher at the time was very supportive and gave a ton of very practical things for me to learn and resources as well. And I remember the interview you had did with Xiaoma. He had mentioned that one of the ways that we should be learning like in the classrooms is by having iPads and talking with language exchange friends. Well, before my time, I was already doing that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because this was the time before you had language exchange apps and those kind of interactive things. So I was just doing it over Skype and put in my profile, I'm American, learning Japanese. I will teach you English. You can teach me Japanese. And that way I made a bunch of Japanese friends and then would be messaging them while in class in the Midwest.
Wow, that's really interesting. How did you find people to talk to? I mean, Skype, right? But it's not exactly a full-out social network, right?
At the time, there was more of making friends just through those kind of social media. So this was also the time, I think Twitter was not really starting. There wasn't really Instagram. So people were purposefully just looking on, I think, like certain forums for language exchange partners and natives that they would be able to talk to. And it was more of they found me and then would message me. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, not a lot of high schools have Japanese language classes, and it sounds like your high school was perhaps a little bit unique in that respect. How did that even come about?
Especially in the Midwest. So my Japanese teacher wasn't actually Japanese, but he had lived in Japan for 7 years and in Akita. So he had a very thick foreigner accent. He was also from Minnesota, which probably doesn't help that either. So you have the very foreigner.
Minnesota, right? Yeah.
Suda, Minnesota. I sure betcha was what he would say all the time. And he would always make fun of us anytime we had a snow delay. He was like, back in my day, and all of that fun stuff, right? But apparently Akita is also the same in that instance. So they're also very big snow country there. And so he met his wife there and they brought her over to America and then was a Japanese teacher for 2 of the local high schools in my hometown because he just had a really big passion for it. And he really invested in a lot of us. And so my high school was quite out of the ordinary because we had 5 different languages available in our language department, despite being just a public school. So I think I was super lucky because many people did not have access to that or would just have to learn by themselves.
Well, you say you started out studying Japanese, and this is something obviously you enjoyed. A lot of people will go ahead and just, hey, Japanese, they'll get really into it. But it sounds like you also branched out into Chinese and Korean. And you also talked about, some of these students that were joining college there. Maybe you could talk about how this actually helped pique that interest into Chinese and how you also made these connections with these other foreign exchange students.
Yes. So when I was learning Japanese, I also stumbled into K-pop for the first time. And there was also a Korean church very close to where I lived. So there's a congregation of Korean exchange students and also local Koreans that were working at the university. Another thing that happened is for 1 year, there were 2 Korean exchange students at my high school, like the only Asians in the entire school. So bless their hearts. Everyone knowing that I was kind of the only one interested in Asian culture, in East Asian culture specifically. No one knew the difference at the time, though. But basically asked me to go and kind of talk to them. And I was one of the few people that would sit with them during lunch and was also willing to try and converse despite having maybe cultural differences and language differences. So those 2 exchange students, both brothers, were ones to teach me how to read and write Korean, specifically Big Bang and G-Dragon songs to them, and then ask them to go over the lyrics with me and teach me the meaning of them. And then I would watch K-dramas and and then use the very cringe things. I didn't know it at the time. Cringe phrases that I learned from K-dramas, like Kajima, Oppa, all that good stuff, right? But at the time, I had no idea that all of these cringe things I was learning would also allow me to then bond even deeper with Chinese exchange students because Americans didn't think this was cool yet. But China was totally on board with EXO having half Korean, half Chinese members. And then also with anime also being very popular in China since a lot of them grew up watching anime, yeah? So that was really cool to bridge into my Chinese friends. And then with American universities at this time, finding out that they can make a lot with having a ton of exchange students on campus. In the early days, like they didn't really have any exchange students, but during, I believe, like the Obama era, they had a ton from like China and also like Saudi Arabia. And so the Chinese exchange students, though, there were a lot of cultural differences and they also couldn't have a car the first year. So I would, as a high schooler, I would give them rides to Walmart and they would then treat me to dinner and they would be so nice and then teach me how to make dumplings. And I was just so hungry to learn their language. And I remember at the beginning, I had many Chinese exchange student friends that were also interested in learning Korean and Japanese, and I would get along with them and we would go to the university's like Japan club together. And that's how I would meet them. But then slowly I started hanging out with more Chinese, considering there's a ton of Chinese, and just became very interested in their language too. And that's really kind of how it all started.
Wow. Wow. That's really interesting. So what were you doing to learn Chinese? And I guess even you highlighted a little bit what you're doing to learn Korean at that point, going through lyrics and stuff. But like, how were you also going about learning these languages?
So with Korean, the community also had a few classes that I was able to take. But then for Chinese, while I was a high schooler, there were no classes available. But I had already had an idea and exposure of characters and the kind of process of characters thanks to Japanese. So I wasn't like super afraid of them, which really helped. And the grammar also seemed to be so much easier. So at this time, again, there weren't like language exchange apps. However, with there being so many different Chinese exchange students, I would just ask them to teach me basics. And they would say something and I would say, what does that mean? Or I would run up to them and say, how do you say this? What was also really funny is that at this point, I did not understand the difference between Northern and Southern Chinese accents.
Okay, yeah.
So, bless my heart, I would mix up their accents when I was using different words because I was just going off of like what I was listening and what I was hearing. Yeah, so you as having been in Shanghai, like you understand that difference, yeah? So like a Beijing person would teach me one word and then a Fujian person would teach me another word. So I would say, whoa, sure, 这个 or something.
Yeah, and you throw in a few R's in there. It's like R,
Yep. And it was so funny. I had no idea how to figure out the tones either. I was just kind of going off of my ear. So looking back at early videos of my Chinese accent, it was horrendous. But I guess we all have that.
Yeah, I think if we all were to look back at some early videos of anyone who's learned Chinese, you'd be like, oh, yeah.
I specifically made a YouTube video of current self making fun of past self just learning Chinese.
That sounds pretty good. Rich content right there. Wow.
Oh, yeah. So much to make fun of.
Well, it sounds like something you continue to go with, like to learn. I mean, I also know that you are a singer, but what did you do after high school? I mean, what did you pursue?
I was a Japanese and Chinese double major. Yep. So that was super helpful. Since in high school, I had already made so many friends on campus. I had also made friends with the campus teachers as well. So I was able to test into the third year Japanese and Chinese classes despite being a freshman.
Yeah. Oh, not bad. Not bad.
Yeah. It also is like a Midwestern school, so probably not as high of like requirements.
Maybe low bar, but hey, good job. You still did it.
Yes, because if it had been like a high bar, I would not have been able to pass whatsoever. I like smooshed my way through it, which is also like something that Chinese culture like helps cultivate. So
Use a little 关系 to get yourself into a higher level class. I got it.
I just got to 拉关系, yeah. But no, thankfully, like they were very supportive and saw like a lot of potential in my passion, especially because there were those that would have language classes not out of like passion for the languages or the culture, but more of so that it looks good on a resume, or they wanted it for like certain future jobs. But for me, I was dripping passion, like when it came to learning these languages. And so
I can believe that.
Yes, right? Even to this day. So freshman year, I was a Japanese and Chinese double major with third year language classes. Then my sophomore year, I got to do a year-long exchange over in Tokyo. And Since I
Wow.
was a Japanese and Chinese double major, I took both Chinese and Japanese classes in Japan
Wow.
and then Korean on the side because some of my Chinese classmates were also taking those classes. So I did all three of those while there. It was so much fun.
That's amazing. That's great. I got to ask, were the Chinese classes, were they taught in Japanese or were they just
Yes.
all Mandarin?
All Japanese because
Oh
then all
my.
my classmates were Japanese. So
Yeah.
with my Japanese classes, all my classmates are foreigners. So with foreigners learning Japanese, the teachers treat us very differently and have very different expectations than standard Japanese would have to their students. So with my Chinese classes and my Korean classes, it was my first time fully experiencing what a Japanese style classroom would actually be like.
Which is, from what I understand, no joke.
Yeah, no. And also very quiet. Like when the teacher asks us questions, we don't even respond. Like everyone's
Oh,
just
really?
quiet. And then
What,
we
that's
ask afterwards.
Oh, interesting. So professors up there are lecturing and you just listen. They ask a question, you don't respond. Is that right?
Yeah. And what was funny is also when the teachers are Korean or Chinese, they also are not very used to that either. Like they want people to be more interactive and respond. But then Japanese teachers do not.
So I'm assuming in those classes, it sounds to me as very academic, not like you're just receiving, if you will. You're only trying to soak up information as opposed to actually learn or practice anything.
Yeah, I would say that it was just a very different system. But then having that wonderful mix of the professors themselves are foreigners, like they themselves are foreigners. So they also are going to be teaching probably more interactively and more practically as a fellow like language learner, right? Because they had to learn Japanese. So they also understand how important the practice is of actually saying stuff. And so they would have us pair up or like have to like recite things. But then I had one Japanese professor. So he was ethnically Japanese, but he was teaching Chinese. And so he rather just had us go through vocabulary and not really say anything during the actual classes. But my professors from China were much more interactive with the students and would have us like act out little skits as well. It was so much fun.
Well, how was that as far as an educational experience and how much you feel like you learned in those classes?
I would say that the classes were really well put together and it really counted how much I applied myself. Because if I was just keeping all of my education or what I was learning in the classroom and not utilizing it outside of the classroom, then I would not really be learning. Like I had been taught it, but I hadn't learned it. I hadn't added it to my vocabulary. So at this time, I felt that I was able to better express myself in Chinese rather than in Japanese. And I didn't understand the Japanese concept of reading the room. So I was in Japanese, they called KY, kuki o yomenai. So meaning that kuki ga yomenai, that we cannot read the atmosphere. So we can't read the room and figure out when is a good time not to say something. So I was very socially awkward. So my weirdness transferred over to now a culture that won't tell me when is a bad time to say something. And, you know, the Japanese also has a phrase, the nail that sticks out will be hammered down. Well, I needed a good hammering.
Well, I'm curious to hear that. You just mentioned that your Mandarin improved a lot during this time.
Yeah.
Did it improve more in comparison to your Japanese? I mean, you were in Japan.
I know, right? Yeah. So I believe that it was because I was in Tokyo specifically, and the classmates that I had were much more strict than probably standard Japanese would be, because that university is specifically for students who want to become teachers. So they're not going to be probably diving into very deep subjects or using a lot of new vocabulary, and it's going to be more surface, the conversation. And at the time, I didn't understand how to go and find my own subcultures and how to get into like the community. And I also lived with all the other foreigner exchange students. So that also was pretty isolating at the same time. So I believe that I hung out much more with Chinese exchange students that were also learning Japanese than I actually hung out with local Japanese. So that would be one of the main reasons. Thankfully, after college, while I was living in Hawaii, I got to meet so many more Japanese that were like that in between of cultures, and they were much more willing to talk to me in different languages. Another thing that happened was my junior year, I studied abroad in Shanghai, and my classmates there, as we were all learning Chinese, I had many Japanese classmates. So now I get to use Japanese with my classmates in China.
There you go. Yeah, that's amazing. Where were you studying in? Talk about that then in Shanghai. I mean, that's my old stomping grounds there. So maybe share a little bit about that.
Yes. So it was an absolute life-changing experience. I felt the most alive while I was studying abroad in Shanghai. So I had been a little bit discouraged from my time in Tokyo because I realized I still didn't understand the culture, even though I thought I knew the language. It meant that I still had so much to learn culturally. And that really hurt my pride. But that's also probably very good for my life. And we definitely need to mature in those areas and realize we don't know everything. That's okay.
What were some things you later on realized you hadn't learned or some things you did afterwards?
I would say that actually, while I was studying abroad in Shanghai, my Japanese classmates were very honest with me about the cultural differences, especially in Tokyo, and the kind of cultural expectations that are more like societal, and how that can be then pretty hard for a person of my personality that is much more outgoing and loud and funny. But then I originally had thought that I, as a person, I am not made to fit into Japan's society. However, my classmates in Shanghai were really enlightening to me, and they were able to point out that Osaka is actually much more made for my kind of personality. And so I didn't have to give up on Japanese because I wasn't quiet or just naturally quiet. I was able to actually realize that there is so much more to Japan than just my one experience and just Tokyo. It was very important for me to learn how to interact according to Tokyo standards. And I'm very grateful for that because that has helped me with interacting with so many Japanese, especially when you first meet them, because you don't want to scare them with my boingy energy.
Yeah.
It's definitely something I could do. But learning about Osaka and having classmates from Osaka while I was in Shanghai for that semester there really helped me to get a new perspective of how I could better fit into Japanese society, but just through maybe a dialect and through comedy. So that is where I was able to really find a better way to express myself in Japanese, was through like the Osaka dialect. Ha ha ha.
Wow, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. But what do you feel like your experience was like in Shanghai?
So Shanghai was so much fun. And because I was able to gather what I had learned or what had gone wrong while I was in Tokyo, since this was my second time studying abroad, I was able to purposefully not live in the foreigner dorm and rather rented my own apartment outside of the school so that I was able to actually become a part of the community. I was also much more proactive in making friends outside of my classes and being able to learn more about the local music, the local language, and make more friends locally. So that was a huge shift for me and was so life-giving. And I also was able to really burst in my creativity because the time in Shanghai was my time starting of Chinese social media. So while I was in Japan, this was back in the day, we had this thing called Vine, and I had loved Vine.
Vines,
Yes.
7-second videos. Yeah.
Yes, but it died when I left Japan, and a part of me died as well. But Shanghai was able to have introduced me to other forms of social media and specifically Chinese platforms. So this was before Chinese TikTok, Douyin came out. This would have been when there was the app called so the app called 美拍, and there was also Weibo. So those were some of the platforms that I would start just interacting with other creatives, and also got to do really fun collaborations with 麦克老师. So there's one content creator that does English content for Chinese audiences. Teacher Mike. He's a ton of fun, and he was in Shanghai at this time as well. So I got to do collaborations with him and with a few other content creators at this time. And it just really sparked my interest in making like music videos, translating lyrics into English, and then making my own covers of them. This was also the time that I was able to gather up a bunch of my classmates who were actors or videographers or music majors, and I was able to throw together a really cool spin of Xue Zhiqian, my favorite singer, Zhou Xue, his most popular song, Yan Yuan, because at the time that I was in Shanghai, which is his hometown,
yes,
he was super popular. Everywhere in the metro station was his 广告. Yeah, was his like
advertisements, his posters.
Yes. So his like advertisements were everywhere, and I loved making like little videos on Chinese social media about how much I loved seeing him and getting to interact with his like really funny advertisements. And I would make a bunch of little comedy sketches. I would cover his songs. I had so much fun with all of that. And also at this time, I was able to do part-time live broadcasting and be a little live broadcasting personality before it was cool. And it was much easier as a foreigner at this time because there wasn't that much competition. And so I would just ask my followers to help me with my Chinese homework.
Wow.
I know, right?
That's awesome. So it sounds like this was a really formative period. And now you were bringing all these people together, like had a lot of diverse talents. I mean, what were you doing though? Were you trying to like make some videos? Or you say you did some live streaming? Maybe you could talk about that.
Yes. So I was able to collaborate with many of my friends and people I had also met through a choir that I joined that year as well. So I was able to be the only foreigner in a like full local community choir and got to do a performance. Yes, I know, right?
That's really neat.
Yeah, with most of them being Shanghainese too. So I got to learn a lot of the dialect. I also got to have my first exposure to more professional choral Chinese music. And this was also my first time hearing Deng Lijun or like Teresa Teng's songs, which would then come very into play later on in my life. But I would say that my live streaming was a time that I got to practice a lot of my reading because they would be sending me comments, live comments, and then I would have to read them out loud. And so if I didn't know a word, they would then put the pinyin and teach me like the meaning of it. So it was a really fun, interactive way to be able to constantly be interacting with people, but also improving my language ability and make some money on the side that I can put towards rent. So
yeah, that's always a good thing. I know Shanghai is the land of like infinite side hustles.
Yes, and it was so much fun too. And so I also got to learn a bunch about Cantonese music at this time.
Really?
This was also a time that they introduced to me like 四大天王 or like a bunch of 80s Cantonese music. So that was my first exposure to that genre as well. But loved Xue Zhiqian, everything Xue Zhiqian. This was his heydays. And then I would say that when it came to making music videos and content, I was utilizing all of the really cool people around me and I even made mock K-drama scenes with some of my Korean classmates. Just having way too much fun.
That's hilarious. That's awesome. Wow. Okay, well, I got to hear a little bit more about this story, Kay, because recently, you had a video that went viral, on social media. Yes. I don't know how viral it went on the US side, but it definitely hit me. I'm sure it went pretty good viral on the China side. I actually got it here. How about let's listen to it, all right?
Okay.
Tell us where this is at real quick. Give the setting of this before we listen to it.
Okay, so I have been to a total of maybe like 5 to 6 Xue Zhiqian concerts. So this was going to be the latest one. The very first one was while I was studying abroad in Shanghai, so 2017. 2018, Xue Zhiqian came to San Jose, and I was the only foreigner in the audience, and he saw me. And so I stood up and then talked to him in Shanghainese, right? So Shanghai-hua. I was
no way.
哎，侬是啥黑呢？哎，弄罗好不香 was what I said to him, right?
Wow.
And so he remembered me. Then this past year, I went to 2 of his concerts inside of China. And then this past month, I went to San Jose again, 5 years, like 6 years later, and got to have the second row seating
Yeah.
And when he first started the concert, he said, all of the boys make some noise. Wee! All of the girls make some noise. Wee! All of the foreigners. And I'm like, wow! Well, Swanba. Like, well, I'm a foreigner, right? And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, I remember you. And I was like, oh, you remember me? I remember you too. And he was like, oh, yeah, you were here last time. And I was like, yeah, thank you so much for coming back. And he's like, thank you so much. And I said, but. So, 这次我想和你唱. And I was
Now
like,
you
but
want to sing with you.
yes, but this time I want to sing with you. He's like, oh, okay. Then I will be having a time when I go around and singing with people. So I will see you there. And I was like, okay, sounds good.
Wow.
And that is the setup
Oh, okay.
for this video.
So here's what happens. Okay, so he's walking down the aisle
Yup.
singing.
There he is. And
There
I've
you go.
been able to come up to the very front. And he's like, foreigner girl, see you again. And then we're singing together. And I'm still stuck in harmony. So I'm harmonizing with him. And he's like,
Yeah.
oop. And so I like point at him. It's like, your turn. And then he brings me back to what we were singing because I even messed up the lyrics. I didn't know where we were singing. And so,
Oh, you messed up the lyrics. I mean,
absolutely.
You sound so beautiful. I mean, you have an amazing voice, and just quieted the crowd. Everyone's just like, wow.
Thank you. No, yeah, this part
It-
was definitely how everything came together. And I was able to really like express my love and appreciation of just him as an artist. And it was
He puts
so...
that ring on your finger, and
Yes.
I got to hear about this. So, and then the last note here. What were you thinking? Is that last note? You're just like,
Honestly, I blacked out afterwards. Like, I couldn't even... It didn't feel like it was actually reality. But I was thinking, like, thank you. I originally thought that he wasn't going to give me the second part of that song
Yeah.
and that he was just going to cut it off there. I was like, well, I already messed up the lyrics, but I got to like hold his hand and he also gave me a hug. So I think I've already like pretty good, but it was really that last bit where I got to really
You
express.
shine.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw you got to shine, and I've watched that video a number of times, and it's like you seized the moment. I don't think there could have been a better point for him to come by during that song, and you seized it. You nailed it.
Right. And I wonder like how much of that was intentional, because while I was in the second row, it's always been a dream of mine to be able to sing with Xue Zhiqian. And every time I go to his concerts, I am so giddy at just the fact that he's there in front of me and I am getting to sing harmony with his voice live at the same time, even though I'm not on stage. But with everything that I am, I would love to be on that stage with him. So I think that in that sense, I've always been different than a lot of fans, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people want to be on that stage singing, right? But you do.
Yes, I really want to. And so ever since 2017, the first time seeing him on stage in his hometown, it's always been a dream of mine to be able to be on stage or sing with him. So this was an absolute dream come true. And it also felt very just kind of him to give me that part of the song, to give me so much of the song, to be able to also give me a hug and a ring. And
I got here by the ring. I didn't notice it. My wife watched it a couple of times. She's like, she gives him something. And we're like, he gave you his ring that was on his finger. Like, tell me about that. And I guess you blocked out. You probably didn't even realize after, I got a ring, right?
Yeah. No, after like while I'm crying, I then like look at the ring and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I've been carrying this ring like on a necklace around with me ever since that day, right? And this ring, it's called Inward. It seems to be a brand that he sponsors. So he will usually at his foreigner concert or like at his concerts abroad, he will usually have, I believe, 2 rings and then also an earring as well that he then gives to the crowd, and then sunglasses too. So that day, it was very interesting. That day, a friend of mine that I had met at the 2018 concert that I had gone and said hello to before the concert started, she was the one that then received his earring. So I know, right? So both of us got to take pictures together of both my ring and her earring. And it just meant so much to us to be able to have something so close to him and like personally from him as well. So in Chinese, they call that process of like a singer or the actor like going up to the audience and everyone's like reaching out, right? They call it feeding the fish. 喂鱼.
That makes sense. Yeah, I got it.
Which totally makes sense. Yeah. But 喂鱼 is something that he's not able to do in China during Chinese concerts because the stages are set very differently and much more like safely. And then with concerts abroad, it really does depend on the kind of location and also like the security present, the way that all of the seats are set up. So thankfully for that location, me being in the second row, I was able to hop up to the first row and I was in the center and didn't have to scurry over to like the sides or the corners where there would have been already been like so many other people. So just the design of everything was like so perfect for that moment and leading up to that moment. And then you had mentioned this went absolutely viral. There's been so much
Because you
coverage.
were filming, I guess you had a friend filming, right, on your phone.
I was filming
And then
myself.
there's just cameras from, the concert, right?
Yes. So there were tons of different angles of this happening and many different angles were like getting a lot of attention. However, my angle, because I was holding my phone the entire time, I've always
were
loved-
you? Oh, you were selfieing that whole thing.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So what I was doing, and if you look at like even the picture that he posted on Instagram of him and I am holding my phone,
Oh, really?
filming myself. Because what I have been doing during concerts, like any concerts that I go to, is that I'll have a camera for taking footage of the stage and then a camera of taking footage of my own reactions. So I'm able to get both of those. And even for the footage of me interacting with Xue Zhiqian, I was able to have both sides. So both his reaction
really?
and my own reaction as well.
Oh, wow. That's neat. Well, tell me, Ben, how did that, you said it went viral in China. Maybe you could talk about that.
Yes. So the day of, thankfully, I had many friends that reached out to me and encouraged me to post about my experience and also the raw footage too. Because I had always thought like, oh, I need to edit it. I need to add subtitles or something. I need to make it spiffy because no one wants to see just raw footage, right? But it was actually the fact that it was so raw that made it so relatable and so real for people too. The other thing is that I had already had accounts on social media, like Chinese social media, for many years and ever since studying abroad. But that had been years ago, like 6-7 years ago. But so many of my posts, even from the early days, were about Xue Zhiqian and about loving him. So, yeah. So what happened and what everything ended up spiraling into, that I was able to post the raw footage of my video on all Chinese social accounts. So Weibo, Douyin, Xiaohongshu that I had just started as well, and was able to give that raw footage of me breaking down in tears because many of the other camera angles did not get that part of it.
Yeah.
The other thing that I got to say, like while I was breaking down in tears, is that this was my dream.
Yeah.
He helped me make my dream come true. And that was a huge, just relatable and also heart-wrenching part of my story and even just this entire process. So in China, what ended up happening is people went through all of my past social media posts and were able to piece together that this has been my dream forever. They pieced together that I was wearing the same shirt as I did in 2018 when he recognized me. And I had purposefully done that just in case he would be able to like see me again or notice me again.
Yeah, just make it a little bit more recognizable, right?
Yes.
Same hairstyle, same hair shirt, same whatever. Right?
Yes, exactly. And then also speaking Shanghainese. So everyone saw like kind of my dedication and also that just raw love for Xue Zhiqian and his music. And it all came together to help me just come off as like very authentic, which I really appreciated because there were some people wondering if this was like just a publicity stunt or if this was all staged, right? Because I seemed to be very, very in control in the moment.
You could sing and you could speak Chinese and maybe you were a plant there just to create some sort of moment. But no, this was a real experience for you.
Yes. And so that was absolutely wonderful. And then right after that happened, one of my friends that was also in San Jose, Alex, he did a little interview with me about the Xuezhiqian incident. And so it's still blowing up and I still get notifications of reposts and people commenting. And so I've had so much fun just going through every single comment and liking each one of them or responding to random people and being able to just appreciate all of the community coming together and everyone just being so encouraging and kind and also very interested in what the next step is. And I'm very excited to then use this moment to make more covers of Chinese songs, but in English too.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, Happy, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's learning Chinese right now or perhaps even thinking about it?
So there's a lot of advice that I wish I could give my starting out self. However, I don't think my starting out self was capable of actually sitting down in one spot and like actually looking over a textbook. So I would encourage everyone learning Chinese right now to figure out what kind of a learner you are and work with your mind and not against it. So rather than kind of thinking that, oh, I need to just use textbooks or I need to just be able to speak, it's very important to go along with how your mind works and how your learning process is and work with yourself in that. I would say that for my journey, being able to interact with people just as a vocal processor in general has been a huge blessing in my life of being able to just constantly have that interaction and have the opportunity of being able to talk with people be my motivation as well. And then with learning lyrics has also been, I would think, like phenomenal for my language learning journey. So falling in love with a singer like Xue Zhiqian and then getting to learn his song lyrics, not just for the language aspect of it, but also with the motivation of someday at KTV or like karaoke, I'll be able to sing this with someone, and having that bonding moment or that like fun moment together with friends be also a motivation. And then even just being able to sing a song word for word, memorizing the lyrics, there's a lot of like not only vocabulary, but even just life lessons we can learn from that. I would think that a ton of that is going to also be very helpful when it comes to daily conversation and even more poetic conversation too. Because when I have Chinese friends speaking like Chengyu, right? A majority of the Chengyu that I recognize is from song lyrics. Otherwise,
really?
I would never be able to remember them, put them in the right order, or remember what they're supposed to mean. They are so abstract for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Wow. Well, I really appreciate that perspective. Work with the type of learner you are as opposed to against it, right?
Yeah, because while I was learning Japanese, I remember just thinking all of my Japanese classmates are like so good at just learning from the textbook and not necessarily needing that interaction in order to be able to remember vocabulary. And I really admired that, but I also had to realize that that's not my learning system, and needing to kind of make up or figure out how to cultivate my own like learning system and keep up with what we were learning, like the material. So I think that was very important for me to learn to work with myself rather than against it or like shame myself for not being able to keep up like everyone else.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Another thing that I would say is if I had had my very first introduction to both Japanese, Chinese, and Korean just be my freshman year of college, I would probably have given up on it. I think that having high school time, because we have so much more time in high school. I do not know why we have so much time. We should not have that much time. But we have so much time to devote to slowly growing accustomed to both like the Japanese like hiragana, katakana, like kanji, and
Mhm.
even like the Chinese pinyin, and then the Korean like hangul. I believe that giving ourselves more time than just one quick semester, your freshman year of college, that was, I think, vital to my journey learning these languages. Because I've also had many friends that they originally were passionate about Japanese and anime, but because it was just so overwhelming their freshman year and the first semester of freshman year, that they just drop the language and don't continue. Because I believe that it's understandable how the professors go about it and the basics, like you need to get those as quick as possible in order to get anything else. But for my heart, I definitely am grateful that I got to have exposure while I still had so much time to process it and grow accustomed to it in high school, rather than just like a knowledge bomb in my semester. Yeah, my freshman semester.
It's something I work with, I guess, learners and teachers on this aspect, that it's very easy for them to dump a whole bunch of incomprehensible input on their students. And it takes time to be familiar with that. And if it's really difficult and incomprehensible for a long period of time, it's painful. And most people drop out of that stuff, frankly. And for every one person who makes it through and just, white knuckles it and grits through it, well, there's 10, 50 people that drop out of that stuff.
Yeah. And it's sad because those people that drop out also possibly had potential in the language.
Oh, absolutely. They all do. Everyone does.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just about learning with our abilities and not against them.
Absolutely. Wow. Now, that's a great perspective. Well, Happi, if people want to find out a little bit more about you and maybe see some of the stuff you're doing, where can they go?
So right now, I am in the process of relaunching my international platforms. So I would say Instagram and YouTube, but I'll keep the names, which is Happi Across Cultures. So Happi, and then Across Cultures is going to be both my YouTube and my Instagram. And then for my Chinese platforms, I am 落音匠贾老外.
Fantastic. We'll go ahead and put a link in the show notes. So if anybody wants to go and see some of that stuff, then they know where to find you. Well, Happi, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today, share your story. And it's just been really, really fun, and not just fun, but enjoyable to meet you and to hear your story.
Well, thank you so much. This was an absolute blessing. And it's just so much fun to be able to bond over how wonderful languages are and just the amazing experiences that we get to have after taking this leap of faith into these crazy languages. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Happi. You have been listening to the You Can Learn Chinese podcast. My name is Jared Turner, co-founder of the Mandarin Companion Graded Reader Series. My co-host is John Pazin, co-founder of Mandarin Companion and founder of All Set Learning, the Chinese Grammar Wiki, and sinosplice.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, take a moment to text or message this episode to a friend, or share it on social media. It really helps us reach more people on their language journey. You can leave us a review or reach out to us at mandarincompanion.com, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can find our Chinese Graded Reader series on Amazon, iBooks, Google Play, or wherever you get your books. Apologies to John Cena, we just ran out of time. The You Can Learn Chinese podcast is produced by myself, Jared Turner, and our editor is Jasper Chua. A special thanks to our guest interview, Happi, and of course, thanks to my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, John Pazin. See you next time.